Hello all, wonderful to be back. I'm just going to take a little, we're going to take a sojourn today through another little essay looking at the compatibility really of Luke Acts and the Greek mimesis in Dennis MacDonald's work. He's an old fella now, pretty renowned historian in the circles he operates in, and he's done a lot for New Testament studies over the years. You can find him online. He's written multiple books on this information, and also the fact I think that the Flavian typology fits very well and meshes very well into his work as well. We find overlap, but we also find complementary information in the way that the Gospels were written. And I'm specifically really focusing here on Mark, Acts, and Luke. Matthew appears in some regards to be an amalgam of those Gospels. As I've said before, about 90% of Mark is found in Matthew. So we can see that it's an augmented gospel, which is a strange thing in its own right, because Matthew was a disciple and Mark wasn't, and you would expect Matthew to know more and to have understood obviously a lot more of what was going on. But what appears to be happening is that Mark is writing in a more primitive way, and that Matthew's copying Mark often verbatim. Matthew is expanding on information in Mark, but all of the evidence seems to suggest that Matthew is obviously a later gospel. There are stylistic reasons for believing that. There are grammatical reasons again for believing this. This is what scholars generally accept. But this is so interesting. You get the Old Testament typology. It is there. Much of the stuff in Joshua, in Joseph, in Moses, in Elisha and Elijah, obviously the Old Testament, some of the prophets, and obviously those characters in Genesis, Exodus, and so on, are then repatched and repackaged into the Jesus story. This is typology. This is Pesherim typology. This was a really well practiced kind of method of predicting and also patterning God's work into the scripture, Old Testament texts, and it happens within the Old Testament, and it happens in Jesus, in the Jesus story as well. Now, Luke and Acts seems to be playing its own game here and doing the same thing, and we have a precedent for believing this in Greek, in the Greco-Roman world, and they practiced mimesis and emulatio as well, this mimicry of ancient texts and the outdoing of a certain series of patterns and so on, and narrative forms and structures and stories in other forms that came before. We do it today. It was a tried, tested, and understood writing style, and Jesus comes along at this time where there's a lot of upheaval, and there's even star prophecies going on, and people are now writing Jesus Christ into history as before, he would have been a more celestial deity. His name supports this idea, Jesus Christ, the Saviour Messiah, not a name. And this is what we appear to be seeing. Now, when you have Rome, and this Roman effort here, I believe, and others too believe in the 2nd century, is coming along to create a new Messiah, to create a God, as the Romans will want to do. Ptolemy did it with Serapis. Then you see the Gospels come around, and they come around just at this time. In about 180, the first real red attestations come about. So I'm just going to read this, and we'll end it. And it should give us a little more understanding of where I'm coming from, because we don't need any notion of an historical Jesus in order to see every aspect of the story coming in from other places. Seriously, and details of stories that came before in other areas. Now, when you put them together, there is nothing new about the New Testament. Absolutely nothing. This helps us understand why there is no evidence for Jesus at all in any accounts that could be eyewitness accounts. There's nothing there. So this makes sense on a variety of different levels, and this is why I've been using this kind of basic Bayesian modeling to help myself understand why this is likely the truth here, and why we have no need for a biblical Jesus, even though we have Yeshua HaNatsri, which I've gone into, Jesus ben Gamala, Jesus ben Ananias, the same names and people associated with these times. So let's crack on. Epic echoes and imperial shadows, Greek mimesis and Flavian typology, Luke and Acts. Abstract. This essay explores the contrivance between Greek mythological parallels in Luke and Acts and the Flavian Titus typology proposed by Joseph Atwell. Far from being mutually exclusive, these interpretive models reveal a multi-layered literary strategy. Luke Acts presents its characters and narratives within both a Greco-Roman epic framework and an historical political satire of the Jewish war and the Flavian rise to power. Bayesian reasoning, thematic comparisons, and narrative sequencing all point to deliberate compositional design. Introduction. Luke Acts has long fascinated scholars for its unique literary tone, Greco-Roman style, and historical ambitions. Dennis MacDonald has traced numerous parallels between Luke Acts and classical epics like Homer's Odyssey and Virgil's Aeneid. Separately, Joseph Atwell has argued that the Gospels mirror events from the military campaigns of Titus as recorded in Josephus's Jewish Wars. This essay asks, do these theories overlap? Can Luke's epic parallels coexist with Atwell's political typology? The answer is a resounding yes. Greek epic parallels in Luke Acts. Luke and Acts mimic key elements of Greco-Roman heroic narratives. As an example, Paul's shipwreck, Acts 27, Odysseus-like journey through stormy seas, blinding of Elymas, Acts 13:6-7, echoes of Polyphemus blinded by Odysseus, Emmaus Road, Luke 24:13-35, recognition scene echoes Odysseus' return to Ithaca and Athena's encounters in the underworld. Luke 24 is added to the original Gospel of Marcion. Luke and Marcion are essentially the same. Luke is an augmented Marcion. Angelic epiphanies, Luke 1, Acts 10, mirroring and divine visitations in epic. Each of these is not merely thematic but often structured sequentially and with Homeric diction. Okay, 3. Atwell's Titus Jesus typology in Luke Acts. Joseph Atwell identifies multiple parallels between Titus's campaign and Jesus and Paul's narrative. In Luke Acts, these include demoniac Gerasene, Gadara. Luke 8:26-39 connects to the 10th Legion, Fretensis. 10th Legion Fretensis. The prophecy of Jerusalem's fall, Luke 21:5-24, matches Titus's siege. false messiahs and prophetic woes. Luke 21:8-23 parallels Jewish rebels like Simon Bar Giora. Simon and John are both found in both of these texts, right? Luke and Acts, and also this Jewish wars, right? They are there. Two names, one dies, one's executed, and one survives. It's all there, really. Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. Luke 19:41 parallels Titus's lament. Eucharistic meal prefigures destruction, like Titus's final assault prefigured by Josephus. Symbolic signs. And there are so many of these. The 4 points of overlap, double coding in Luke. These parallels often exist within the same episodes. For example, now I'm going to read that. Okay, yeah, Luke 8:26-39, the demoniac and swine. Okay, Odysseus, Polyphemus circle, and 10th legion and the destruction. So the legion word is used in both Luke and Titus here as well. Luke 21:6, 21:20, the temples fall, prophetic destruction motifs in the Iliad. Titus just destroys the temple. Luke 19:41, Jesus laments, heroic weeping, Aeneas and Hector. Titus's ironic lament here. Acts 27, Paul's shipwreck, Odysseus' final journey, Titus crossing to Judea. The Emmaus narrative, Luke 24. Anagoresis, like Odysseus in Ithaca. And Titus moves anonymously in Galilee. Okay, so here we go. Luke thus blends Greco-Roman literary tropes with encoded Roman political satire. These layers do not compete. They amplify the Gospel's interpretive depth. So these things can be seen here because of the stunning array of parallels. And I think there's just got to be a literary dependency here. It's too strong and too detailed to make any conclusion other than these are dependent texts. These were written side by side by literary Romans, literate and highly elite thinkers in the Roman Empire. And with a huge amount, by the way, of Hellenistic and Jewish input. And I think this is obviously true as well. But then we get that with Titus's connections to Jewish Romanized Jews. And I've gone into this before. There's actually quite a lot of evidence for this. And there's evidence in Acts for this as well, when Romans are portrayed well. You get that in the Gospels. Theological and literary implications. If both epic and imperial layers are present, Luke Acts presents Jesus and Paul as greater than Odysseus. Aeneas and other pagan heroes, foils to failed Jewish rebels of the Jewish war, fulfillers of divine prophecy embedded in history and literature. Again, so this reveals an extraordinarily sophisticated authorial strategy. The text communicates to literate Greco-Roman audiences via epic resonance. So they're doing propaganda here to connect these stories that people will know. So there's nothing too new about this. This is not a revelatory, completely new paradigm that's hitting the Greco-Roman world. This is stuff that they can relate to. Politically aware insiders via satire or typology, theologically astute readers, again, via fulfillment motifs. And even if you can't read these texts, right, which would have been the majority of people in the Greco-Roman world, you're going to get this from these new ministers, bishops, deacons in the church, who are going to help you to understand. And it took 1,500 years for these books to be put in the hands of normal people, by the way. So the conclusion. Luke Acts, far from being a flat historical account, is a multi-dimensional literary artifact. Its Homeric and Virgilian echoes invite comparison with heroic sages. Its embedded parallels to Titus's campaign, as highlighted by Atwell, suggest a politically conscious text. These dimensions do not exclude one another, rather they interlock. Luke's Jesus and Paul function as mythic heroes, divine agents, and veiled political statements. Again, this is why we get this subservience to Roman rule in the accounts. They're very clear. It is not true that it's just not true that Rome and this new Jewish faith didn't like each other, and that I mean, lots of Christians were coming in later on and writing these martyrdom stories, but they were later. One, truthfully, you can see this, and two, they didn't really have much of a with the grander scheme of things, and this is of course why in the 4th century you get Rome taking on Christianity, and Constantine had an immense respect for Titus, and I will go into this in later videos. It's really interesting. The Arch of Constantine is right by and in one of these places that Titus and his father built. He had a respect for Titus. The double coding is not only possible but highly likely given the Greco-Roman milieu of the Gospel authors. In the world of Luke Acts, epic and empire merge, each amplifying the power of the other. So that's basically it. I don't think I have anything else to say really. It's worth studying these books. Go and buy Atwell's work. Go and buy and have a look at the many interviews you'll find with both of these characters. I don't believe, and I'm not going to say in any of these videos that I believe 100% with these individuals' beliefs, their opinions and so on, but the work is amazing. It's phenomenal, and there's more coming. There's a new book that's just been written by a man called Michael Manascots, and I'm going through it at the moment quite slowly because it's very detailed, but it appears that there are actually many more links here between Josephus's wars and the old prophetic texts and Luke as well, and they're like considerable parallels that pop out at you, and some real revelations in Manascott's work. So again, we do not have to wonder whether one or the other possibility has to stand here. These things lightly complemented each other. The books, the gospel literature was really, when you think about it, fashioned over hundreds of years from its origins in Jewish texts. And as Jesus appears to be a galactic superhero, really, in his original form, and a co-creator with God himself, and this agent of creation, this firstborn son of the Most High, sits at the right hand of God himself. In Hebrews, he's slaughtered in heaven, and before the great, God, Jehovah, and so on. It's all there though. It's phenomenal having written 2 books on this subject, because everything comes out of the text themselves, and this is despite the fact that so much editing has gone on and so much interpolation has been thrown in the mix. It's still possible to work out, to define the original text, and to truly pick out the original stuff. I believe this wholeheartedly. Anyway, peace out. Have a good one. I'll be back hopefully tomorrow.